Hi, comrades. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. Unfortunately, not live, but at least being able to send you a message so we can analyze the situation with the elections in the U.S. and what are the political perspectives for the coming months and possibly a new government in the U.S. led by Biden and the Democratic Party. As of this moment, which is 3 p.m. on Friday in the Eastern time in the US, there is still not a clear winner. Biden is leading in several swing states, several key states, which are fundamental for the composition of the Electoral College. The electoral system in the US is indirect. That means that states choose whoever wins the election in a state gets the representation for the Electoral College, and on that basis, that the votes on the Electoral College are distributed. So what we have now is a very narrow race, despite the fact that in the popular vote, Biden is leading by around 4 million votes at this moment, but we have a very narrow race in several key states. Essentially, it has come down to 4 states: Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. In all of those 4 states, Biden now has a very narrow lead in all of them. In some of them, that lead has been withstanding for several days. For example, in Arizona, that lead has been standing, but Trump has been getting closer. And in others, Biden has just come to the lead over the past few hours. That has been the case in Pennsylvania and also in Georgia. So at this moment, the most likely scenario is that Biden will win by a small margin in each one of those states, or at least in most of those states, which would put him give him enough votes in the Electoral College to become the next president. So the most likely scenario is a Biden presidency. Of course, we're not certain of that yet, but that looks like the most probable scenario at this point of the recount. Huh? One of the things is that, of course, it has shown the decadence of the political regime of the U.S. With all the elections and everything that has happened throughout the elections, and now with the count of the votes of the election. So one additional thing of the present conjuncture is the fact that there is a legal challenge to the election. The Trump campaign has presented lawsuits, especially concentrated in Georgia and in Pennsylvania. These lawsuits have to do with the count of the mail-in votes, which have been record. There has been a record amount of mail-in votes, of course, because of the conditions of the pandemic. In the US, people can not only vote on the day of the election in person by going to the schools or the voting locations, they can also mail votes previously. This has been so for many, many years. And most states implemented this, expanded these possibilities over the course of this year in view of the pandemic. So there has been expanded mail-in voting. This has meant that in many cases, for example, nationwide, there are at least 100 million votes have been casted by mail. So this means that the count of the mailing vote is what has made the count of the votes take much longer. So the litigation of the Trump campaign is concentrated in saying that the votes that were received past the election date should not be counted. These are legal votes that were sent before the election date, but arrived afterwards because of delays in the mail, etc., but are postmarked before the election day. So those are considered legal votes, but Trump is questioning them with so small margins. This means that, of course, if some of those legal challenges were to prosper, that could change the outcome of the election. It does not look at this point, of course, the scenario is changing permanently, so we have to be cautious in what we say, but at this point, it doesn't look like those lawsuits will prosper, essentially because the victory is clear, both in the Biden victory is clear both in the popular vote and in the Electoral College. It will eventually be clear, despite by very little difference, but it will be clear. So there is little ground for a legal challenge that will prevail. So again, the most likely scenario is that eventually we will have a result that will be a Biden presidency. This might, there have been elements of mobilization of Trump supporters to the polling stations, to the recount stations, but it hasn't been massive at all. They have been small. And there have been also counter protests, very large in some cases, in cities like Portland, here in New York, in Washington, D.C., and in different places around the country. There have been much larger protests demanding for the vote for the counting to continue. So this is essentially the conjuncture, the present moment. Now, how did we get here? Well, this entire election process has been, of course, marked by the economic and health crisis triggered by the pandemic. And the handling of the crisis has been one of the main elements of the election, but also the massive and historical anti-racist revolt that we have seen developed essentially over the summer in the U.S. This is the framework that these are the elements in which the election was framed. So these are the elements that explain why Trump was defeated, but they also explain why Trump was not so clearly defeated. Because we have to say that Trump has been defeated, but at the same time, it is true that Trump has managed to obtain more votes than what he got in 2016. That he in 2016 got around 62, 63 million votes, and now he will get around 70 million votes. No? Biden will get almost 74, 75 million votes, which is 10 million votes more than what Hillary Clinton got in 2016. So the climate, the political scenario of polarization translated into the election, which meant that both sides there was a rise in the motivation to go vote, essentially for or against Trump. Trump was the main element in the election in that sense, and it has ended in a defeat of Trump that wasn't a landslide defeat. And therefore, Trumpism and possibly Trump, but Trumpism as a right-wing force will remain as a stable political presence in the foreseeable future. So, what would be the difference between a Biden and a Trump administration? What has been the essence of the Biden campaign? What have they been saying? Biden aims to build essentially a government of national unity. This government of national unity has a program of imperial restoration and of restoring the legitimacy of the capitalist democracy. So it has to restore the economic growth. It has to help build an economic recovery. It has to restore the legitimacy of the democratic institutions, which have been extremely damaged, and they have become less and less legitimate in the eyes of millions of people. And it also is a project of imperial restoration that has been made clear by Biden in his program, and it also has to do with the coalition that supports Biden. Biden has had the support of the most important sectors of Wall Street, and he has had the support of the most important sectors of the state and military apparatus. More than 100 high-ranking national security officials of former Republican administrations have endorsed Biden. Colin Powell, for example, known for having sold the Iraq war to the world, endorsed Biden. So I think those elements clearly show what is the social composition of a Biden government, which will be a government of national unity, which will pose itself as a government of national unity in order to restore the legitimacy of bourgeois democracy and of bourgeois and US imperialism. So that is essentially the task they have forward. And in that sense, it will be in certain ways different from the Trump administration, in the sense that the Trump administration was essentially an America First administration. That meant that on an international scale, it alienated allies, and in a national scale, it delegitimized liberal consensus, the liberal institutions on which the U.S. the hegemony of the U.S. Ruling class was built in the States, essentially on a liberal hegemony, and towards the world they tried to project that idea. So Trump has shattered those liberal consensus. He has shattered the system of alliances internationally, and Biden wants to restore that legitimacy, wants to restore that liberal legitimacy. So that would be the essential difference between one and the other in terms of what we can expect in the world and in the US. Of course, then there are things that have to do essentially with how the context will evolve. I mean, the Biden presidency will not only be conditioned by this situation which I'm describing of economic crisis, of the pandemic, it would also be conditioned by the fact that there was a huge uprising which was not defeated, and that is why, essentially, that is one of the reasons why Trump lost the election. There was a huge uprising that was not defeated. So it would also condition the possibilities of the Biden administration to move forward with this program of imperialist restoration and of restoring the legitimacy of bourgeois democracy. So the current situation with the pandemic and the economic crisis will be one of the main elements of the foreseeable future. At present, with the pandemic, we have around more than 90,000 cases daily at least for the last 10 days on a national scale, which means that the U.S. is effectively in its third wave. The first wave was in April, and in May it had its epicenter here in New York. The second wave was in the summer with epicenter in the south, and now a third wave that essentially has gone throughout the country. So we have records every day. Yesterday it was more than 100,000 cases in a single day. So there is no, the pandemic will not be solved in the foreseeable future, and neither will the economic crisis. In the second trimester, the U.S. economy, the GDP fell by around 37%. Now there has been growth. In the third trimester, that there has been a 33% growth, but that growth is still below what was before the numbers before the pandemic. So, for example, unemployment, which got up to 40 million at one point, has now come down, but it is still much higher than what it was before the pandemic. In some states, for example, that are very much dependent on the economy of tourism, as for example Nevada, a state where Las Vegas is, unemployment is still over 12%, which is a very, very high rate on US standards. So in the country, unemployment is around 6 or 7% right now. But still, the numbers of consumption, the numbers of GDP growth, the numbers of unemployment have not gotten back to the numbers previous of the pandemic. And in the foreseeable and in the immediate future, all the analysts agree that there will not be a continued growth like there was in the second trimester. So there will be a tendency of stagnation of that growth. So what this will mean is that the US economy will have stopped falling, but it will stagnate at a new low compared to March of this year. So that means that the economic situation is very, very complex. In a moment of increased inter-imperialist tensions, in a moment of increased economic crisis internationally, in a moment of in which the framework of the neoliberal system has in many ways, of the neoliberal version of capitalism has in many ways shown its limits in terms of capitalist accumulation and has given many problems. So this is the economic situation, the situation with the pandemic. So in general, all of this means that we are heading towards a Biden government that will try to restore legitimacy, that will try to recover the economy, that will try to restore the imperial project of imperial restoration. But it will be very hard, in very hard conditions, and there will be a very very strong class struggle in the immediate future, because the mass movement has not been defeated, and it comes from a rebellion. It doesn't come from defeat and demoralization. And finally, debates on the left. It has been several years with many strategic and tactical debates on the left. Essentially, one of the main ones, these debates have now turned into, have over the past few months turned on the fact that if the left had to vote or not vote for Biden, a significant portion of the socialist left was dragged under the so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party, was dragged by them into campaigning and calling for a Biden vote. Significant portions of the Jacobin-related left, of sectors that related to a part of the leadership of the DSA, etc., openly called for a Biden vote. This, of course, we think has been a huge mistake. We have written several polemics with this orientation, essentially because it is an orientation that under the idea of stopping fascism, it builds a popular front. And as it has been proven once and again throughout history, popular fronts do not stop fascism. Quite on the contrary, popular fronts disarm the mass movement, disarm and demobilize the socialist left, disarm and demobilize the mass movements, and render them and make them incapable of facing the challenge of fascism and the extreme right. So we think that this is a completely mistaken strategy and tactic, to which most of the socialist left, or a large portion of the socialist left, has yielded, calling for a Biden vote. In this sense, the tasks of the International Socialist League have been related to giving these debates, intervening as much as we can in the public debates of the socialist left, arguing for the building of an independent socialist alternative, of an independent party for the working class, independent from both parties of capital, and the need for this to be an essential task of the moment. So we have been arguing against, of course, the call for a Biden vote, showing that both candidates were candidates of capitalist and imperialist parties, and more importantly, that voting for Biden would not stop fascism. Quite the contrary, it would only reproduce the conditions that led to the rise of the far right. So we have, our main task has been, of course, relating to the socialist left in the US, to the comrades that have resisted this process of cooptation into the Biden camp, which fortunately there are many comrades that have resisted, and we have established many contacts with them, and of course trying to intervene as much as we can with this perspective in the task of rebuilding the socialist left. So essentially that is an overview. I don't want to use so much of your time. Thanks very much for having me here to give you this brief analysis, and we will surely in the upcoming days be writing more in the ISL website, and I wish all the comrades of the SEP the best of luck, and our solidarity in all the struggles in Turkey and around the world, and to keep building this project, which is more essential than ever, of the International Socialist League. So the best to you, comrades, and hopefully see you soon.